The stars had always been beautiful from Elysium Prime. Children would lie on the grass at night and count them, making wishes on the brightest ones. Parents would tell stories about distant worlds where humans lived and worked and dreamed. The colony had existed for nearly 200 years, and in all that time, the people had never known true fear. That changed on the morning the sky turned dark with ships. Armada. Chun stood at the window of the Colonial Defense Center and watched the Zirvathi Armada emerge from hyperspace. The ships appeared one by one at first, then in groups of 10, then in groups of 50. They kept coming. The detection systems counted them automatically, and the number climbed higher and higher until it stopped at 412. 412 warships. Each one was larger than the biggest human vessel ever built. Each one carried enough firepower to turn a moon into dust. And they had all come to Elysium Prime. "Captain Chun," said Lieutenant Torres, his voice shaking slightly, "we are receiving a transmission from the lead vessel." Amara turned away from the window. She was 43 years old, with gray streaks in her black hair and lines around her dark eyes. She had served in the Earth Defense Fleet for 20 years before the war began. She had fought in 11 battles against the Zirvathi Empire. She had watched her friends die. She had watched Earth fall. Now she commanded the last human warship in existence. "Put it on the main screen," she said. The screen flickered to life, and Amara saw the face of her enemy for the first time. Lord Vithros was tall and thin, with pale blue skin that seemed to glow faintly in the light of his bridge. His eyes were large and completely black, like pools of oil. He had no nose, only 2 small slits above his lipless mouth. When he spoke, his voice was cold and smooth, like ice sliding across metal. "Human vessel," he said. "I am Lord Vithros, Supreme Commander of the 7th Imperial Armada. I speak on behalf of the Zirvathi Empire, which has ruled this galaxy for 5,000 years. Your species has been judged and found wanting. Your worlds have been conquered. Your fleets have been destroyed. Your home planet is now under our control." Amara said nothing. She simply watched and listened. "You have one chance to survive," Vithros continued. "Surrender now, without condition. Open your planetary shields and allow our forces to land. Submit to processing and relocation. If you do this, some of your kind will be permitted to live as servants of the Empire. If you refuse, we will reduce your colony to ash and scatter your atoms across the void." The transmission ended. The screen went dark. For a long moment, no one in the defense center spoke. Amara could hear the breathing of her officers, fast and frightened. She could hear the hum of the computers and the distant rumble of the colony's power generators. Outside, she knew, millions of people were looking up at the sky and seeing their death written in the formation of alien ships. "Captain," said Commander Rodriguez, her first officer. He was a big man with broad shoulders and a thick beard. His hands were steady, but his eyes were wet. "What are your orders?" Amara looked at him. Then she looked at Torres and at the other officers who filled the room. They were all waiting for her to say something. They needed her to tell them what to do. She thought about Earth. She thought about the day the Zirvathi had first attacked, 6 months ago. She remembered watching the news feeds as city after city burned. She remembered the evacuation ships, packed with refugees, being shot down as they tried to escape. She remembered her sister's last message, sent just before the communication networks went dark forever. "Tell me we will survive this," her sister had said. "Tell me there is hope." Amara had not been able to answer. She had not known what to say. Now, standing in the defense center of humanity's last colony, she finally found her words. "Open a channel to Lord Vithros," she said. Torres looked at her with surprise, but he obeyed. A few seconds later, the screen came back to life. The alien commander stared at her with his black eyes, waiting. "Lord Vithros," Amara said. "I am Captain Amara Chun of the Earth Defense Fleet vessel Defiance. I have heard your terms, and I have a response." "Speak quickly, human," Vithros said. "My patience is limited. You said we have one chance to survive. You are wrong. We have no chance to survive, and we know it. We have known it since your ships appeared in our sky. But you have made a mistake in coming here." The alien's eyes narrowed slightly. "And what mistake is that? You think that because we cannot win, we will not fight. You think that because we face certain death, we will choose to kneel. You have conquered 63 species across 5,000 years, and every one of them has surrendered when the odds became hopeless. You believe we will do the same." Amara stepped closer to the screen. Her voice was steady and calm. "But we are not like the others. We are human, and humans do not kneel." She paused for a moment, letting her words sink in. "You want this colony? You want these people? Then come and take them. Bring your 400 ships. Bring your weapons and your soldiers and your 5,000 years of conquest. Bring everything you have." She smiled, and there was no fear in it. "Come get us." The transmission ended. Amara turned away from the screen and walked toward the door. "Captain," Rodriguez said, "what are we going to do?" Amara stopped at the door and looked back at him. "We are going to fight," she said, "and we are going to make them remember us forever." She left the defense center and walked through the corridors of the colonial government building. People moved aside to let her pass. They had all seen the ships in the sky. They all knew what was coming. But when they looked at Amara, they did not see despair in her eyes. They saw something else, something that made them stand a little straighter. She reached the landing pad where her shuttle was waiting. Rodriguez and Torres were already there, along with a squad of Marines who would escort her back to the Defiance. The ship was in orbit above the colony, hidden behind one of Elysium Prime's small moons. "Captain," said Sergeant Williams, the leader of the Marine squad, "the crew is ready. Everyone knows the situation." "Good," Amara said. "Let's go." The shuttle lifted off and rose through the atmosphere. Amara watched the colony grow smaller below her, the cities and farms and forests becoming tiny dots of color against the brown and green of the land. Somewhere down there, 8 million people were waiting to learn their fate. She would not let them down. The shuttle passed through the upper atmosphere and entered the darkness of space. The Zirvathi Armada hung in the distance like a swarm of metal insects, their ships arranged in perfect formation. They were waiting for the humans to surrender. They were certain it would happen. The shuttle rounded the moon, and Amara saw the Defiance for the first time in 3 days. The ship was not beautiful. It was scarred and battered, with burn marks on its hull and patches of emergency repairs covering holes from previous battles. One of its main engines was completely dead, and the other was running at less than half power. Its weapons systems were damaged, its shields were weakened, and its crew was exhausted. Lord Vithros had ruled over conquered worlds for 300 years. He had led armies across the stars and brought dozens of species to their knees. He had seen empires fall and civilizations crumble. In all that time, he had never once questioned the superiority of the Zirvathi Empire, until now. He stood on the bridge of the Eternal Dominion and watched the human ship on his view screen. It had been approaching for nearly 40 minutes, and it showed no signs of slowing down. His tactical officers had run projections and simulations. They had calculated the probable outcome of every possible scenario. The answer was always the same. The human ship would be destroyed. It was inevitable. It was mathematical certainty, and yet something was wrong. Vithros could feel it in the depths of his being. Something about this situation did not make sense. The humans were not stupid creatures. They had proven that throughout the war. Their technology was primitive compared to the Zirvathi, but their tactics were creative, and their determination was unlike anything he had ever seen. So, why would they send one ship against 400? What could they possibly hope to accomplish? "My lord," said Commander Silas, his second in command, "the landing forces have reached the colony surface. They report no resistance. The humans appear to be gathering in their cities, waiting." "Waiting for what?" Vithros asked. Silas hesitated. "Unknown, my lord. Perhaps they have accepted their fate." Vithros did not believe that. The humans never accepted their fate. That was what made them so dangerous and so frustrating. They fought when they should surrender. They hoped when there was nothing to hope for. They believed in things that did not exist, like destiny and justice, and the power of the individual spirit. It was madness. Pure, beautiful, terrifying madness. "What is the status of the approaching vessel?" Vithros asked. "It will enter weapons range in approximately 15 minutes, Silas reported. "Our ships are in standard defensive formation. We can destroy it at any time." "No," Vithros said. "Not yet. I want to understand what they are doing, my lord. Look at them, Silas. One small ship against our entire armada. They know they cannot win. They know they will die. But they are not running. They are not hiding. They are coming straight at us, as if they believe they have a chance." Vithros turned to face his commander. "In 5,000 years of conquest, we have faced 63 different species. Every single one of them has behaved in predictable ways. When outmatched, they retreat. When cornered, they surrender. When faced with certain death, they beg for mercy. It is the logical response. It is the only sensible response." He pointed at the view screen. "But the humans do not behave logically. They do not do what makes sense. And that makes them more dangerous than any enemy we have ever faced." Silas considered this. "What do you suggest, my lord?" "I suggest we be careful. Very careful." Vithros walked back to his command throne and sat down. His black eyes never left the view screen. "Scan their ship," he ordered. "I want to know everything about it. Every system, every weapon, every piece of equipment. If there is something unusual, I want to know about it." "Yes, my lord." The scanning began. Vithros watched the data flow across his displays. The human ship was called the Defiance, which was a fitting name. It was a Prometheus-class destroyer, one of the largest warships the humans had ever built. But it was badly damaged. Its engines were failing, its weapons were barely functional, and its shields were operating at less than 30% capacity. It was no threat to his armada. That much was obvious, but something still bothered him. "My lord," said the sensor officer, "we are detecting unusual energy readings from the human vessel. There appears to be some kind of device in their engineering section that we cannot identify." "What kind of device?" "Unknown. It does not match any human technology in our database. The energy signature is strange. It appears to be drawing power from multiple sources throughout the ship." Vithros leaned forward. "Can you determine its purpose?" "No, my lord. But whatever it is consuming a significant amount of the ship's remaining power. If they continue at this rate, they will have no energy left for weapons or shields." This made no sense. Why would the humans waste their precious energy on an unknown device when they were about to enter combat? What could possibly be more important than weapons and shields in a battle? Unless the device was their real weapon. The thought struck Vithros like a physical blow. He had been thinking about this situation the wrong way. He had been assuming that the humans were attacking because they were desperate, because they had no other choice, because they wanted to die fighting rather than surrender. But what if that was not true? What if the humans had a plan? What if they knew something he did not? Move the fleet into combat formation, Vithros ordered. All ships prepare to engage. My lord, Celis said with surprise. For one small destroyer? Do it. The order went out, and 400 Zirvathi warships began to move. They shifted from their defensive positions into an attack formation, surrounding the approaching human vessel on all sides. Weapon systems powered up. Shields activated. Thousands of crew members took their battle stations. Vithros watched it all with growing unease. He was missing something. He was certain of it. The humans were not behaving the way they should. And that meant they had a plan he could not see. He needed to know what that plan was. Open a communication channel to the human ship, he ordered. A moment later, the view screen changed to show the bridge of the Defiance. Captain Amar Chun sat in her command chair, surrounded by her crew. She looked calm and confident, as if she was not flying towards certain death. Lord Vithros, she said, I did not expect to hear from you again. Captain Chun, Vithros replied, I must admit, you have surprised me. I expected your species to surrender once you saw the size of my fleet. Instead, you are attacking. It is unusual. But it was still alive. And so was everyone aboard it. The shuttle docked with the Defiance, and Amara stepped onto her ship. The corridors were crowded with crew members moving quickly to their stations. Many of them stopped to look at her as she passed. She nodded to each of them, meeting their eyes. She reached the bridge and took her place in the captain's chair. Rodriguez stood beside her. Torres took his position at the communication station. Around them, the bridge crew worked their consoles with quiet determination. Status report, Amara said. All stations reporting ready, Rodriguez said. The crew is at battle stations. Chief Engineer Webb says the engines will hold for at least a few more hours. A few more hours is all we need, Amara said. What about the device? Rodriguez hesitated. Webb says it's almost ready. Another hour, maybe two. But he wants me to remind you that it has never been tested. We don't know if it will work. It will work, Amara said. Webb is the best engineer in the fleet. If he says he can do something, he can do it. Captain, Torres said, I'm picking up movement in the Zirvathi formation. Several ships are breaking away from the main group. They're heading toward the colony. Amara nodded. They're sending a landing force. They expect us to try to stop them. Should we engage? Amara was silent for a moment. She studied the tactical display, watching the dots of enemy ships move across the screen. The Zirvathi were following their standard pattern. They had used the same tactics against every species they had conquered. They believed those tactics were perfect because they had always worked before. But they had never faced humans before. No, Amara said. We're not going to stop them. We're going to let them land. Rodriguez stared at her. Captain, trust me, Amara said. I know what I'm doing. She turned to face the main view screen, which showed the distant shape of the Zirvathi Armada. Lord Vithros thinks he understands us, she said. He thinks we will behave like all the other species he has conquered. He expects us to defend the colony, to spread our forces thin trying to protect the people on the ground. That's what a logical enemy would do. She smiled again, and there was something dangerous in her eyes. But we are not logical. We are not going to defend the colony. We are going to attack the Armada. The bridge was silent. Everyone was looking at her now. One ship against 400, Torres said quietly. Captain, that's not a battle. That's suicide. No, Amara said. It's a trap. And Lord Vithros is about to walk right into it. She leaned forward in her chair. Set course for the center of the Zirvathi formation. Maximum speed. The Defiance's engines roared to life, and the ship began to move. It emerged from behind the moon and accelerated toward the enemy fleet. On the bridge of every Zirvathi vessel, alarms began to sound. Sensors detected the lone human ship approaching at high speed. Lord Vithros received the report with disbelief. He had expected the humans to hide, to defend, to beg for mercy. He had not expected them to attack. He stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, and watched the human vessel grow larger on his view screen. It was small and damaged, and clearly no match for even one of his destroyers. The idea that it would challenge his entire armada was absurd. And yet there it was, flying straight toward him. "My lord," said his tactical officer, "should we engage?" Vithros considered the question. His fleet had traveled across half the galaxy to reach this system. They had destroyed every human defense force they had encountered. They had conquered Earth itself, the homeworld of this strange species. The war was over. This last colony was merely a formality, a final piece of cleaning to be done before the victory could be celebrated. One small ship could not change that. It was impossible. But something about the situation troubled him. The humans had proven to be unpredictable enemies. They did not fight like other species. They did not surrender when they were beaten. They did not run when they faced impossible odds. They kept fighting, even when there was no hope of victory. It was illogical. It was wasteful. And it was deeply, disturbingly effective. Vithros had studied the reports from every battle of this war. He had read about human commanders who had sacrificed their own ships to destroy enemy vessels. He had read about human soldiers who had fought to the last breath, refusing to retreat even when their positions were overrun. He had read about human civilians who had taken up weapons and joined the fighting, despite having no military training. No other species behaved this way. The mathematics of war demanded that a force retreat when it was outmatched, that it surrender when resistance became futile. Every intelligent species understood this. Every intelligent species acted accordingly. But the humans did not. "My lord?" the tactical officer said again. "Your orders?" Vithros watched the human ship on his screen. It was still coming, still accelerating toward his fleet. It would arrive in less than an hour. "Ignore it," he said finally. "It is one ship. It can do nothing against us. Continue with the landing operations. Once we have secured the colony, we will deal with this nuisance." "Yes, my lord." Vithros turned away from the screen and walked to his command throne. He sat down and tried to put the human ship out of his mind. It was nothing. It meant nothing. But as he sat there, he could not shake the feeling that he was missing something important. The humans were unpredictable. They did things that made no sense. They attacked when they should retreat. They fought when they should surrender. And now one of their ships was flying directly toward his armada, alone and outgunned and clearly doomed. Why? The question nagged at him. He tried to find an answer, but none came. The human behavior was simply too alien, too strange for him to understand. He did not realize it yet, but that was exactly what Captain Amara Chun was counting on. Aboard the Defiance, Amara watched the Zirvathi fleet grow larger on her view screen. The enemy ships were not moving to intercept her. They were letting her approach. They were so confident in their superiority that they did not even consider her a threat. "Good. Captain," Rodriguez said, "we're receiving a message from Chief Engineer Webb. He says the device is ready." Amara nodded slowly. "Tell him to stand by. We're going to need perfect timing for this." "Captain," Torres said, "I need to ask, what exactly is this device? What are we planning to do?" Amara was quiet for a long moment. Then she turned to face her crew. "6 months ago, when this war began, we knew we could not defeat the Zirvathi through conventional means. Their technology is too advanced. Their numbers are too great. Every battle we fought, we lost. Every world we defended, we lost. We were dying, and there was nothing we could do to stop it. She paused, gathering her thoughts. But we did not give up. We kept fighting. And while we fought, our scientists kept working. They studied every piece of Zirvathi technology we could capture. They analyzed every weapon, every ship, every piece of equipment. And they found something. She pointed at the tactical display. The Zirvathi use a specific type of reactor to power their ships. It's incredibly efficient, but it has a weakness. If you know the exact harmonic frequency of a reactor, you can overload it remotely. You can make it explode. The bridge crew stared at her. For months, we have been gathering those frequencies, Amara continued. Every battle we fought, every ship we destroyed, we harvested data from their reactors. We were not trying to win those battles. We were trying to learn. And now? Rodriguez asked. Now we have enough data to do something that the Zirvathi believe is impossible. Chief Engineer Webb has built a device that can create a localized fold in spacetime. When we activate it, every ship within range will be forced into a random hyperspace jump. Some will end up inside planets. Some will end up inside stars. Most will end up in the empty void between galaxies, where they will drift forever. Torres shook his head in amazement. That's incredible. But how will we power it? Something like that would require more energy than our ship can generate. Amara smiled. That's the beautiful part. We don't need to power it ourselves. We're going to use their reactors. When we overload them, the energy release will be channeled into Webb's device. The Zirvathi will destroy themselves. The bridge was silent as the crew absorbed this information. Then, slowly, Rodriguez began to laugh. It was not a laugh of despair or madness. It was a laugh of pure, delighted surprise. They have no idea, he said. They think we're committing suicide. They think we've gone mad. But we're not attacking them. We're baiting them. Exactly, Amara said. We need to get close enough to their flagship to bring as many ships as possible within range of the device. That means we need to fight them. We need to draw them in. We need to make Lord Vithros so angry that he forgets to be careful. She turned back to face the view screen. And then we need to make them pay for everything they have done to us. The Defiance continued its approach. Ahead, the Zirvathi Armada waited, 400 ships strong, certain of their victory. They had no idea what was coming. The universe became fire and thunder. Amara Chun held tight to her command chair as the Defiance bucked and shook under the assault. Warning lights flashed across every console. Smoke filled the air. The ship's computer announced damage reports in a calm, steady voice that seemed completely wrong for the chaos around them. Forward shields at 12%, Rodriguez shouted over the noise. Hull breaches on decks 4 through 7. We've lost 3 weapons batteries on the port side. Keep us moving, Amara ordered. Do not slow down. The Defiance plunged deeper into the Zirvathi formation. On every side, enemy ships fired their weapons, creating walls of energy and projectiles that should have torn the human vessel apart. But the ship kept moving, dodging and weaving through the storm of destruction with movements that seemed almost impossible. The secret was simple. Amara knew exactly what the Zirvathi would do before they did it. For 6 months, while humanity was losing battle after battle, the survivors had been studying their enemy. They had analyzed every engagement, every tactic, every decision made by Zirvathi commanders. They had found patterns that the aliens themselves did not know existed. The Zirvathi were brilliant warriors, but they were also predictable. They fought by rules that had not changed in 5,000 years. They used formations that had worked against 63 different species. They believed those tactics were perfect because they had never failed. But they had never failed because no one had ever studied them closely enough to find their weaknesses. Until now. Enemy destroyer coming in from starboard, Torres called out. Weapons charging. Wait for it, Armada said. Her eyes were fixed on the tactical display. Wait. Now, hard to port. The Defiance rolled sharply to the left, just as the enemy destroyer fired. The blast passed through the space where the human ship had been a moment before. But the Defiance was no longer there. It was already moving, sliding between two Zirvathi cruisers that could not fire without hitting each other. They're confused, Rodriguez said with amazement. They don't know what we're doing. They can't understand it, Armada replied. Everything we're doing violates their tactical doctrine. We're supposed to retreat when outmatched. We're supposed to form defensive lines. We're supposed to behave in ways that make sense to them. But we're not doing any of that. She smiled grimly. We're doing what humans do best. We're improvising. The battle continued. The Defiance moved through the enemy fleet like a dancer, graceful and deadly. It could not match the Zirvathi in firepower or numbers, but it did not need to. It only needed to survive long enough to reach the flagship, and it was getting closer. On the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, Lord Vithros watched the human ship with growing frustration. Every time his forces tried to trap it, it escaped. Every time they predicted its movements, it did something unexpected. It was as if the humans could read his mind. How are they doing this? He demanded. How are they avoiding our attacks? Unknown, my lord, Celis replied. Their tactics do not follow any logical pattern. They appear to be making decisions at random. They're not random, Vithros said. Look at their course. They're still heading directly for us. Every move they make brings them closer to the ship. He studied the tactical display. The human vessel was now only a few thousand kilometers away, weaving through the final line of ships between it and the flagship. It had taken damage, severe damage, but it was still functioning. Still fighting, still coming. Focus all nearby ships on the human vessel, Vithros ordered. I don't care about losses. I don't care about formation. Just stop them. My lord, if we concentrate too many ships in one area, we risk friendly fire. Do it. The order went out. 30 Zirvathi ships broke formation and moved to intercept the Defiance. They formed a wall of metal and weapons directly in the human ship's path. Armada saw them coming. That's a lot of ships, Rodriguez said quietly. Yes, it is. We can't dodge that many. No, we can't. Armada was silent for a moment. Then she turned to face Torres. Open a channel. All frequencies. I want the entire Zirvathi fleet to hear this. Channel open, Captain. Armada stood up. She looked at the view screen, where the wall of enemy ships was growing larger with every second. Lord Vithros, she said, I know you're listening. I know you're watching. And I know you're afraid. On the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, Vithros stiffened. Afraid? He had not known fear in centuries. He was the supreme commander of the greatest military force in the galaxy. He had crushed entire civilizations beneath his heel. But as he watched the human ship approaching, he felt something cold and unfamiliar in his chest. You have conquered 63 species, Armada continued. You have ruled over half the galaxy for 5,000 years. You believe you are invincible. You believe nothing can stand against you. The Defiance accelerated toward the wall of ships. It was not turning away. It was not trying to escape. But you've never faced anything like us. You've never fought an enemy that refuses to give up. You've never seen what humans can do when we have nothing left to lose. The enemy ships opened fire. The space between them and the Defiance filled with weapons discharge. You think this ship is trying to survive, Armada said. You think we're trying to escape. But you're wrong. We're not trying to survive. We're trying to reach you. And nothing you do can stop us." The Defiance flew into the wall of fire. The ship shook with impacts. Explosions ripped through the hull. Entire sections lost power. Crew members were thrown from their stations. The lights flickered and died, replaced by the dim red glow of emergency systems. But the ship kept moving. "Shields are down," Rodriguez shouted. "Multiple hull breaches. We've lost engines 2 and 3. Keep us going," Armada ordered. "We're almost there." The Defiance burst through the other side of the enemy formation. It was burning and broken, trailing debris in atmosphere. Half its weapons were gone. Its main reactor was flickering. It looked like a dead ship flying on pure momentum, but it was through, and the Eternal Dominion was directly ahead. Lord Vithros stared at his view screen with something close to horror. The human ship should have been destroyed. It had taken enough damage to kill a fleet. And yet, there it was, still coming, still fighting, still refusing to die. "Open fire!" he screamed. "Everything we have. Destroy them." The Eternal Dominion's weapon systems activated. The most powerful weapons in the Zirvathi Armada locked onto the approaching human vessel. But before they could fire, something unexpected happened. "We are human," Armada said. "We do unusual things." "Indeed. But I am curious. What do you hope to accomplish?" "Your ship is damaged. Your weapons are weak. You are one vessel against 400. By any reasonable calculation, you will be destroyed within minutes of engaging my forces." Armada smiled. "Perhaps. But the future is not always determined by reasonable calculations." "What do you mean?" "I mean that you are thinking about this battle the wrong way. You see numbers and statistics. You see 400 ships against one. You see an easy victory. But you are not seeing what is really happening." Vithros felt his unease growing. "And what is really happening?" "You will find out soon enough." The communication ended. Vithros sat in silence, staring at the screen where Amara's face had been. She had told him nothing useful, but her confidence was disturbing. She truly believed she could win this battle. She truly believed she had a chance. It was impossible. It was irrational. But it was real. "My lord," Silas said, "the human ship has entered weapons range. Should we open fire?" Vithros hesitated. Part of him wanted to destroy the human vessel immediately, to end this strange confrontation before it could develop further. But another part of him wanted to understand. He wanted to know what the humans were planning. He wanted to see their secret weapon, whatever it was. And perhaps, in some small corner of his ancient mind, he wanted to see if they could actually do it. If one small ship could somehow challenge an entire armada. "No," he said. "Let them come closer. I want to see what they do." Deep in the engineering section of the Defiance, Chief Engineer Marcus Webb was working on the most important project of his life. The device in front of him was a mess of wires and circuits and glowing crystals, held together with tape and hope and desperate improvisation. It looked like something a child had built from spare parts, but it was going to change everything. Marcus was 52 years old. He had been an engineer for 30 years, first in the commercial shipping industry and then in the Earth Defense Fleet. He had built engines and weapons and life support systems. He had repaired ships that were falling apart and created solutions to problems that seemed impossible. But he had never built anything like this. The Weber Paradox. It was named after Dr. Elena Weber, the physicist who had first proposed the theory. She had suggested that it might be possible to create a localized fold in spacetime, a bubble that would force everything inside it to make a random hyperspace jump. The energy requirements were enormous, but the potential was almost unlimited. Dr. Weber had died when Earth fell. She had been in her laboratory, when the Zirvathi bombs hit. She had not lived to see her theory put into practice. Marcus intended to honor her memory. "How is it looking?" asked Lieutenant Chen, who was standing nearby with a fire extinguisher. The device had already caught fire twice during the construction process. "It's ready," Marcus said. "Or as ready as it's ever going to be. I can't guarantee it will work. We've never tested it. We don't even know if the theory is correct. But you believe it will work?" Marcus looked at the device. It hummed quietly, drawing power from every system on the ship. It was ugly and crude and held together with prayers. "I believe it has to work," he said. "Because if it doesn't, we're all going to die. We might die anyway." "True, but at least we'll die trying something incredible." He turned to face Lieutenant Chen. "Tell the captain we're ready. As soon as we're close enough to the enemy flagship, I can activate the device. But I'll need about 30 seconds of uninterrupted operation to build up enough power." 30 seconds is a long time in a battle. "I know, but it's the best I can do." Lieutenant Chen nodded and left to deliver the message. Marcus turned back to the device and ran one final check on the systems. Everything was green. Everything was ready. All they needed now was to get close enough. On the bridge, Amara received the message from engineering. She acknowledged it with a brief nod and turned her attention back to the view screen. The Zirvathi ships were all around them now, closing in from every direction. The Defiance was surrounded. "Captain," Rodriguez said, "we're in weapons range. The enemy ships are targeting us. I see them. They're not firing yet. They're waiting for something." "They're waiting for me to do something stupid," Amara said. "They want to see what our plan is before they commit to an attack. Should we give them a show?" Amara smiled. "Yes, I think we should." She turned to face her bridge crew. These were the people she had served with for years. They had fought together, bled together, and watched their friends die together. They were more than crew members. They were family. "Listen to me," she said. "What we're about to do has never been done before. We're going to fight an entire armada with one ship. We're going to fly into the heart of the enemy fleet and activate a device that might not even work. We're probably going to die." No one spoke. No one moved. "But we're not doing this for ourselves," Amara continued. "We're doing this for everyone we've lost. For Earth, for Mars, for all the colonies that fell. We're doing this for the 8 million people on the planet below us, who are counting on us to save them. We're doing this for the future of our species." She stood up from her chair. "The Zirvathi think they've won. They think this war is over. They think humans are just another species to be conquered and forgotten. But they're wrong. Because today, we're going to teach them something they've never learned in 5,000 years of empire." Her voice rose, filled with fire and determination. "We're going to teach them that humans don't give up. We don't surrender. We don't kneel. And when we're backed into a corner with nowhere to run and nothing to lose, we become the most dangerous things in the universe." She looked around at her crew. "Are you with me?" The answer came from every throat on the bridge. A single word shouted with all the passion and defiance that humans could muster. "Yes." Amara sat back down in her chair and gripped the armrests. "Then let's show them what we can do. All hands, prepare for combat. Navigation, set course for the enemy flagship. Weapons, prepare all systems for rapid fire. Shields, divert all available power to forward arrays." "Captain," Torres said, "the enemy is opening fire." The first Zirvathi weapons hit the Defiance's shields like hammers. The ship shook violently, and alarms began to sound throughout the bridge. Damage reports flooded in from every section. But the ship held. The shields held. The crew held. And the Defiance kept moving forward, straight into the heart of the Armada. Lord Vithrus watched from his flagship as the human vessel refused to die. His ships were pouring weapons fire into it, enough firepower to destroy a small moon, and still it kept coming. Its shields flickered and sparked. Its hull took hit after hit. Fires burned along its surface and were extinguished by emergency systems. But it did not stop. Impossible, Silas breathed. How are they still alive? Vithrus did not answer. He was watching the tactical display, tracking the human ship's course. It was not random. It was not desperate. It was precise and calculated, weaving through his fleet with a purpose he could not understand. And then he saw where it was heading. "They're coming for us," he said quietly. "They're coming for this ship." "My lord, that's impossible. Our flagship has the strongest shields in the fleet." "They could never." "They're not trying to destroy us," Vithrus interrupted. "They're trying to reach us. They need to get close to us for some reason. The device. The unknown device in their engineering section. Whatever it was, it required proximity to work. That was why they were not attacking from a distance. That was why they were flying straight into the heart of his armada. They had a weapon he had never seen before. A weapon that required them to get close. And he had let them do exactly that. "All ships!" Vithrus shouted. "Destroy the human vessel. Destroy it now." The order went out, and the full fury of the Zirvathi Armada turned toward the Defiance. Thousands of weapons fired at once, creating a wall of destruction that nothing could survive. The Defiance flew straight into it, and did not stop. The first rescue ship reached the Defiance 2 hours after the battle ended. It was a small cargo vessel called the Morning Star, piloted by a woman named Rosa Martinez. She was 60 years old, a retired merchant captain who had spent her whole life moving goods between colonies. When the Zirvathi invasion began, she had volunteered her ship for evacuation duty, carrying refugees from one world to another. Now she was the first human to see the Defiance up close after its impossible victory. The ship was a ruin. Its hull was torn open in dozens of places. Its engines were completely dead. Fires had burned through entire sections, leaving nothing but blackened metal and melted conduits. The ship looked like it had been killed 100 times over, but as Rosa brought the Morning Star alongside, her sensors picked up something amazing. Life signs. Weak, scattered, but unmistakable. There were people still alive on that ship. "This is the cargo vessel Morning Star to any Defiance crew members," Rosa said into her communicator. "Do you read me? Is anyone alive in there?" For a long moment, there was only static. Then a voice came through, weak and strained. "Morning Star, this is Lieutenant Torres, Communications Officer. We read you." Rosa felt tears forming in her eyes. "Lieutenant, what is your status? How many survivors do you have?" There was a pause. Then Torres spoke again. "We're still counting. Many sections of the ship are sealed off. But we have at least 100 confirmed survivors. Maybe more. 100 survivors out of a crew of 340. Nearly 2/3 of the crew had died in the battle, but 100 had lived. 100 people who had helped defeat an armada. We're coming to get you," Rosa said. "Just hold on." The rescue operation took 12 hours. More ships arrived from Elysium Prime, everything that could fly and carry passengers. Doctors and medics came aboard the Defiance, treating the wounded and searching for survivors in the damaged sections. Engineers stabilized what they could and sealed off what they could not. And slowly, the story of what had happened began to emerge. Lieutenant Torres was one of the first to be evacuated. He was suffering from smoke inhalation and a broken arm, but he refused to leave until he had told the rescue teams everything he knew. "The captain," he said, his voice hoarse. "Captain Chun. She was on the bridge when the device activated. The bridge took heavy damage in the final moments. We need to find her. A team of rescuers cut through the sealed doors to the bridge. What they found inside would become legend. Captain Amara Chun was still in her command chair. Her hands were locked around the armrests, frozen in place. Her eyes were closed. There was blood on her face from a wound on her forehead, but she was not burned. She was not crushed. She was simply still. The medic who reached her first was a young man named Dr. Samuel Park. He had been a trauma surgeon on Earth before the invasion. One of the few who had managed to escape. He had seen death many times, in many forms, but he had never seen anything like this. "She's gone," he said quietly. "She must have died just after the device activated. The medical scanner says her heart stopped approximately 90 minutes ago. Can you tell how?" asked Commander Rodriguez, who had survived the battle with only minor injuries and had insisted on joining the rescue team. Dr. Park studied his scanner readings. "The data is unusual. Her body shows signs of extreme stress, as if she was exposed to enormous amounts of energy. But there's no external cause of death. No wounds that would have been fatal." It's like he trailed off, unable to find the words. "Like what?" Rodriguez pressed. Like she held on by sheer willpower until the job was done. And then, when it was over, she just let go. Rodriguez looked at his captain's face. She looked peaceful, almost satisfied, as if she had accomplished everything she had set out to do and was finally at rest. "That sounds like her," he said softly. "She never did anything halfway." The body of Captain Amara Chun was carried off the Defiance with full honors. The crew members who could still walk formed a line along the corridors, standing at attention as she passed. Many of them were crying. All of them were saluting Dodd. She had saved them. She had saved the colony. She had saved the future of humanity. And she had given her life to do it. News of the battle spread across Elysium Prime within hours. The colonists had seen the flashes of light in the sky, had felt the strange shaking when the vapor paradox activated. But they had not known the details. They had not known how close they had come to extinction. Now they knew. Screens in every home and public. Space showed footage from the rescue ships. They saw the ruined hull of the Defiance. They saw the survivors being carried out on stretchers. They saw the empty space where 400 enemy ships had once been. And they saw the face of Captain Amara Chun, the woman who had told an alien empire to come and get her. The reaction was overwhelming. People gathered in the streets, in the parks, in every open space. They hugged strangers. They cried. They laughed. They did not know how to process what had happened. So they did all of it at once. In the colonial capital. The governor addressed the public. "Today," she said, her voice shaking with emotion, "we witnessed something that will be remembered for as long as humans exist. One ship faced an entire armada. One crew stood against impossible odds. And they won." She paused, gathering herself. "We have lost many brave people. Captain Amara Chun, Chief Engineer Marcus Webb, 240 crew members who gave their lives for our survival. We must honor their sacrifice. We must remember what they did." The governor looked directly into the camera. "But we must also understand what this victory means. The Zirvathi Empire believed they could not be defeated. They believed their power was absolute. Today, we proved them wrong. Today, we showed the entire galaxy that humans will not be conquered. We will not be broken. We will fight until our last breath, and even then, we will find a way to win." She raised her hand. "To the crew of the Defiance, to Captain Chun, to everyone who fought and died today, thank you. We will never forget you." Across the planet, millions of people raised their hands in response. It was a gesture of respect, of gratitude, of solidarity. A promise that the sacrifice would not be in vain. But the battle had consequences beyond. Elysium Prime. The Zirvathi Empire had dominated the galaxy for 5,000 years. In that time, they had conquered 63 different species, absorbing their worlds and their people into the Imperial structure. Those conquered species had accepted their fate because they believed resistance was impossible. The Zirvathi were too powerful. Their technology was too advanced. Their numbers were too great that now everything had changed. Word of the battle spread through the Empire like wildfire. The details varied depending on who was telling the story, but the core fact remained the same. One human ship had destroyed an entire armada. The supreme commander of the 7th Fleet was dead. The invasion of the human colony had failed. The monsters could be killed. On 100 conquered worlds, beings who had given up hope began to whisper among themselves. If the humans could defeat the Zirvathi, maybe others could too. Maybe the Empire was not as invincible as it seemed. Maybe resistance was possible after all. The Zirvathi leadership recognized the danger immediately. They tried to suppress the story, to claim that the battle had never happened, that the 7th Fleet had been destroyed by a natural disaster. But there were too many witnesses, too many survivors, too many communications that had been intercepted before they could be deleted. The Defiance launched missiles. Not ordinary missiles, but modified ones that carried no explosives. They were just empty shells with transponders inside. They flew past the Eternal Dominion and spread out through the surrounding space. And then they began to broadcast. "What is this?" Vithros demanded. "What are they doing?" "My lord," said the sensor officer, his voice trembling. "The missiles are transmitting data. Harmonic frequencies. They're broadcasting the resonance patterns of our reactors." Vithros did not understand at first. Then the meaning hit him like a physical blow. "No," he whispered. "That's impossible." "My lord, the frequencies are accurate. If those patterns reach our ships, they could trigger a cascade reaction in our power cores." On the bridge of the Defiance, Amara smiled. "Now," she said quietly, "do it now." Deep in the engineering section, Marcus Webb heard the order through his communications unit. His hand hovered over the activation switch for the Weber paradox device. "This is for Dr. Weber," he said. "This is for Earth. This is for everyone they killed." He flipped a switch. The device hummed to life. Energy surged through its circuits, building rapidly toward critical levels. The power drain was enormous. Lights dimmed throughout the ship. Non-essential systems shut down completely. But it was working. On the tactical displays of every Zirvathi ship in the Armada, something strange began to happen. Their reactor readings started to fluctuate. Power levels spiked and dropped randomly. Warning alarms sounded. "My lord," Scylla shouted. "Something is happening to our reactors. They're destabilizing." Vithros looked at his displays with growing terror. The harmonic frequencies from the human missiles were interacting with his ship's power systems. The resonance was building, amplifying, spreading from ship to ship like a disease. "Shut down the reactors," he ordered. "All ships, emergency, shut down." "We can't. The frequencies are overriding our control systems." "The reactors are." The first Zirvathi ship exploded. It was a cruiser, positioned about 200 kilometers from the Eternal Dominion. Its reactor went critical without warning, releasing all its energy in a single devastating blast. The explosion destroyed 2 nearby frigates and damaged half a dozen other vessels. Then another ship exploded. And another. And another. The chain reaction spread through the Armada like fire through dry grass. Ships that had ruled the stars for millennia came apart in brilliant flashes of light. Crew members screamed in terror as their vessels tore themselves apart around them. But this was only the beginning. The energy from the exploding reactors flowed into the Weber paradox device aboard the Defiance. Marcus Webb watched his readings climb higher and higher, well beyond anything they had predicted. "Captain," he shouted into his communicator, "the device is charging faster than expected. We're reaching critical capacity." "How long?" Amara asked. 30 seconds. Maybe less." On the bridge, Amara looked at the view screen. The space around them was filled with explosions and dying ships. The Zirvathi Armada was tearing itself apart. But Lord Vithros was still alive. The Eternal Dominion had not exploded. Its shields were protecting it from the cascade reaction. They needed to get closer. "Navigation," Amara said. "Ramming speed." Rodriguez looked at her with shock. "Captain, we need to be closer to the flagship when the device activates. The closer we are, the more ships will be caught in the effect. If we ram them, we'll be destroyed." "I know." Amara met his eyes. "But we'll take them with us." There was a moment of silence on the bridge. Then Rodriguez nodded slowly. "It's been an honor, Captain. The honor is mine." The Defiance's remaining engines fired one last time. The ship surged forward, accelerating toward the Eternal Dominion on a collision course. Lord Vithros saw them coming. He understood now what they were doing. They were not trying to survive. They had never been trying to survive. From the very beginning, this had been a suicide mission. But not just any suicide mission. This was a weapon. The humans had turned their own death into a weapon aimed directly at his heart. Evasive action. He ordered, "Get us away from that ship." But it was too late. The Defiance was too close, moving too fast. The Eternal Dominion's engines could not accelerate quickly enough to escape. Amara watched the enemy flagship fill her view screen. 20 seconds until impact. 20 seconds until the end. "Engineering," she said. "Status report." "Device at 90% capacity," Marcus replied. 10 seconds until full power. Understood. Amara looked around her bridge one last time. She saw Torres at his communication station, still working despite the chaos around him. She saw Rodriguez standing beside her, steady and calm. She saw every member of her crew doing their jobs until the very end. They were human. They did not kneel. They did not surrender. They fought until there was nothing left. And now they would show the universe what that really meant. "It's been my privilege to serve with all of you," she said. "When this is over, remember that you were part of something that mattered. Remember that you made a difference." "Captain," Marcus said through the communicator, "the device is ready. Full power." Amara took a deep breath. "Activate." For a brief moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the universe changed. The Weber paradox device released its energy in a single overwhelming pulse. Space itself seemed to bend and twist around the Defiance. The fabric of reality stretched and tore, creating a bubble of distorted space-time that expanded outward at incredible speed. Every ship within the bubble began to shift. Their positions became uncertain, their locations undefined. They were everywhere and nowhere at once, existing in multiple points in space-time simultaneously. And then they jumped. Not controlled hyperspace jumps. Random jumps. Uncontrolled jumps. The ships were scattered across the universe like seeds thrown into the wind. Some appeared in the hearts of stars. Some materialized inside planets. Some found themselves in the vast empty spaces between galaxies, millions of light years from any Alp. On the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, Lord Vithros watched his view screen fill with impossible light. He felt his ship begin to shift and blur, felt reality itself beginning to come apart around him. In his final moment, he understood what had happened. The humans had not been fighting a battle. They had been setting a trap, and he had walked right into it. "Impossible," he whispered. And then he was gone. The light faded. The distortion collapsed. The bubble of twisted space-time shrank and disappeared. Where the Zirvathi Armada had been, there was only empty space. 400 ships, the pride of an ancient empire, had vanished in an instant. They were gone, scattered across the universe, never to return. The Defiance floated alone in the darkness. It was broken and burning, its hull torn open in 100 places. There was no power, no lights, no movement, but it was still there. And so were some of its crew. On the surface of Elysium Prime, 8 million people looked up at the sky. They had watched the battle unfold through telescopes and sensors. They had seen the explosions. They had felt the moment when the universe itself seemed to shake. And now they saw the result. The Armada was gone. The threat was over. They were alive. For a long moment, no one spoke. No one moved. The magnitude of what had happened was too great to process. Then someone began to cheer. And someone else. And someone else. The sound spread through the cities and towns, growing louder and louder until it seemed like the entire planet was shouting with joy and relief and gratitude. They had been saved. By one ship. By one crew. By humans who had refused to accept defeat. The story of the Defiance had just begun. The truth was out. And it was spreading. Back on Elysium Prime, Commander Rodriguez sat in a hospital room, recovering from his injuries. He had refused to rest until he had given a complete report of the battle to the colonial government. Now, finally, he allowed himself to close his eyes. But he could not sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the battle playing out again. He saw the enemy ships closing in. He saw the wall of fire that should have destroyed them. He saw Captain Chun standing on the bridge, calm and confident, leading them through the impossible. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," he said. The door opened, and a woman entered. She was young, maybe 25, with dark hair and tired eyes. She was wearing a civilian clothes, but she carried herself like someone with military training. "Commander Rodriguez?" she asked. "I'm sorry to disturb you. My name is Elena Torres. I was Miguel Torres' sister." Rodriguez sat up straighter. "Lieutenant Torres, the communications officer. He had survived the battle, but barely. He was still in critical condition in another part of the hospital." "I know who you are," Rodriguez said. "Your brother is a hero. He kept communications running, even when the systems were failing. We couldn't have done it without him." Elena smiled sadly. "He always was stubborn. Never knew when to quit." She sat down in the chair beside the bed. "I wanted to thank you," she said, "for saving him, for saving all of us. I know you must be tired of hearing it, but I'm not the one who needs thanking," Rodriguez said. "Captain Chun, Chief Webb, all the crew members who didn't make it. They're the real heroes. You're too modest. Miguel told me what happened. He told me how you led the damage control teams during the battle. How you kept the ship together when it should have fallen apart. You're a hero too, Commander." Rodriguez was silent for a moment. Then he shook his head. "I was just doing my job. Following orders." The captain was the one who had the plan. She knew exactly what she was doing from the beginning. She saw a way to win when everyone else saw only death. How? Elena asked. How did she know? How could anyone know that the plan would work? She didn't know, Rodriguez said. Not for certain. The Weber paradox had never been tested. We had no way of knowing if it would actually work. But the captain believed it would. And she made us believe too. He looked at the ceiling, remembering. That's what made her special. Not her tactics or her strategy. Her faith. She believed in us. She believed in humanity. She believed that no matter how bad things got, we would find a way to win. And she was right. Yes, she was right. Elena was quiet for a while. Then she asked, "What happens now?" "The Armada is gone, but the Empire is still out there. They'll send more ships, more soldiers. They'll want revenge." Rodriguez nodded slowly. "Probably. But things are different now. The galaxy knows that the Zirvathi can be beaten. That knowledge is more powerful than any weapon. Other species will start to fight back. The Empire's grip will weaken." He turned to look at her. "And we'll be ready. We'll rebuild our defenses. We'll build new ships. We'll learn from what happened and become stronger. The Zirvathi might come back, but they'll find that humans are not the easy target they expected." "You really believe that?" "I have to believe it. Captain Chung gave her life for this chance. I'm not going to waste it." Elena nodded. She stood up and offered her hand. "Thank you, Commander." "For everything." Rodriguez shook her hand. "Take care of yourself. And tell your brother to keep fighting. We're going to need people like him in the days ahead." After Elena left, Rodriguez lay back and closed his eyes again. This time, sleep came more easily. The battle was over, but the war was just beginning. In the weeks that followed, the people of Elysium Prime began the long process of recovery and rebuilding. The wreckage of the Defiance was towed to an orbital dock, where engineers worked to salvage what they could. The ship itself was too damaged to ever fly again, but its components could be used to build new vessels. More importantly, the data from the Weber paradox device was recovered and analyzed. The scientists who studied it were amazed by what they found. The device had worked even better than expected. The energy channeling technique that Marcus Webb had developed could be refined and improved. With more research, they might be able to create more powerful versions of the technology. Humanity had gained more than a victory. They had gained a weapon. The Zirvathi Empire took notice. Within a month, intelligence reports indicated that the Empire was pulling back its forces from several frontier regions. The conquest of human space had been indefinitely postponed. Other priorities had emerged. Those other priorities were the rebellions that had begun to spread through the conquered territories. On a dozen worlds, species that had accepted Zirvathi rule for centuries were suddenly rising up. They were citing the human victory as inspiration. They were saying that if one ship could defeat an armada, then anything was possible. The empire that had seemed invincible was starting to crack. And at the center of it all, in the sky above Elysium Prime, the broken hull of the Defiance floated like a monument. A reminder of what humans had accomplished. A promise of what they would accomplish in the future. The story was far from over. 10 years had passed since the Battle of Elysium Prime. The galaxy was a different place now. The Zirvathi Empire, which had ruled half the known stars for 5,000 years, had fallen. Not all at once, but slowly, piece by piece. As the cracks that appeared after the battle grew wider and deeper, it had started with the rebellions. On world after world, conquered species had risen up against their masters. They had been inspired by the story of one human ship that had faced an entire armada and won. If the humans could do the impossible, they reasoned, then perhaps they could too. The Empire had tried to crush these rebellions. They had sent fleets and armies to restore order. But for every uprising they put down, 3 more appeared. The conquered peoples had lost their fear, and fear had been the foundation of Zirvathi power. Within 5 years, the Empire had lost control of 1/3 of its territory. Within 7 years, the losses had reached half. Now, 10 years after the battle, the Zirvathi held only their original home systems, surrounded by former subjects who had become equals. The ancient empire had not been defeated in a single battle. It had died slowly, bleeding power and territory until there was nothing left. And at the root of that death was a single moment when one human captain had refused to surrender. On Elysium Prime, a ceremony was being held. The plaza in the center of the colonial capital was filled with people. Thousands had come to witness this day, the 10th anniversary of the battle. Giant screens had been set up around the plaza so that everyone could see, even those standing at the very back of the crowd. On a stage at the front of the plaza, a group of people sat in places of honor. These were the survivors of the Defiance, the 100 crew members who had lived through the impossible. Many of them had retired from military service. Some had become teachers, passing on what they had learned to a new generation. Others had continued to serve, helping to build humanity's new fleet. All of them had become legends. Commander Rodriguez sat at the center of the group. He had been promoted to admiral after the battle and had spent the last 10 years overseeing the reconstruction of human military forces. His hair was gray now, and his face was lined with age and responsibility. But his eyes were still sharp, and his back was still straight. Beside him sat Miguel Torres, the communications officer who had kept the Defiance connected to the world, even as the ship fell apart around him. He had made a full recovery from his injuries and had gone on to develop new communication systems that were now used throughout human space. And beside Torres sat Elena Torres, who had married Rodriguez 3 years after the battle. She had joined the military herself, inspired by her brother's courage, and had risen to become one of the most respected officers in the fleet. The crowd fell silent as the governor of Elysium Prime took the stage. She was an older woman now, the same governor who had addressed the public 10 years ago. She had refused to retire, saying that she would serve as long as there was work to be done. Citizens of Elysium Prime, she began. Friends from across human space. Visitors from other worlds. Welcome to this ceremony of remembrance. She paused, looking out at the sea of faces before her. 10 years ago, on this very day, our world faced extinction. An armada of 400 enemy ships hung in our sky, ready to wipe us from existence. We had no fleet. We had no weapons. We had nothing but the hope that somehow, some way, we would survive. She turned to gesture at the survivors on the stage. And then the Defiance came. One ship against 400. One crew against the might of an empire. They flew into the heart of the enemy fleet, knowing they would probably die. They fought with everything they had. And they won. The crowd began to cheer. The sound rolled across the plaza like thunder, shaking the buildings and filling the air with the roar of human gratitude. The governor waited for the noise to subside. The story of the Defiance has spread across the galaxy, she continued. It has been told on 1,000 worlds in 100 languages. It has inspired billions of beings to stand up and fight for their freedom. It has changed the course of history. She looked directly at the survivors. But we must never forget that this was not just a story. It was real. Real people made real sacrifices. Real lives were lost. Captain Amar Chun gave her life to save us. Chief Engineer Marcus Webb died at his post, keeping the device running until the very end. 240 crew members went to their deaths so that we could live. She bowed her head. We honor them today. We remember them. And we promise that their sacrifice will never be forgotten. The crowd fell silent again. On the screens around the plaza, images appeared. The faces of those who had died aboard the Defiance. Their names. Their stories. They were not just statistics. They were people who had loved and dreamed and hoped, just like everyone watching after a long moment. The governor raised her head. I would now like to invite Admiral Rodriguez to speak. Rodriguez stood slowly. He walked to the podium and looked out at the crowd. For a moment, he said nothing. He seemed lost in memory, seeing things that no one else could see. Then he spoke. I was there, he said, his voice quiet but clear. I was on the bridge of the Defiance when Captain Chun gave the order to attack. I saw the fear in the eyes of my crew, and I saw them push that fear aside and do their duty. He gripped the edges of the podium. People asked me what it was like. They want to know how it felt to fly into the heart of an enemy fleet with no hope of survival. I tell them the truth. It was terrifying. Every second, I expected to die. Every moment, I thought the next blast would be the one that ended everything. But I also felt something else. Pride. Not pride in myself, but pride in the people around me. Pride in the captain who never wavered. Pride in the engineers who kept the ship running when it should have fallen apart. Pride in every single crew member who did their job even when death was certain. He paused, gathering his thoughts. That's what made us different from the Zirvathi. They fought because they wanted to conquer. We fought because we refused to be conquered. They saw war as a means to power. We saw it as a last resort, something to be endured when all other options had failed. And in the end, that difference was what decided the battle. The Zirvathi could not understand why we kept fighting. They could not comprehend an enemy that would rather die than surrender. That confusion was their weakness, and we exploited it. Rodriguez looked around at the crowd. The galaxy calls us heroes. They tell stories about the Defiance and the humans who refuse to give up. But the truth is, we were just ordinary people doing what we had to do. We were scared. We were tired. We wanted to run away and hide, but we didn't. Because that's what humans do. When our backs are against the wall, when there's nowhere left to run, we stand and fight. Not because we're brave, but because we can't imagine doing anything else. He straightened his back and raised his chin. Captain Chun understood this. She knew that humans are at their best when things are at their worst. She knew that the Zirvathi would never be able to beat us because they could never understand us. And she used that knowledge to save us all. Today, we honor her memory. We honor the memory of everyone who served aboard the Defiance. But we also honor something more than that. We honor the spirit that made their victory possible. The spirit that says no matter how dark things get, no matter how hopeless the situation seems, there is always a reason to keep fighting. He raised his hand in a salute. To the crew of the Defiance, to Captain Amara Chan, to the human spirit that never gives up. Today and always we remember. The crowd erupted in cheers once more. People waved flags and banners. Some were crying. Others were laughing. The emotion was overwhelming, a release of 10 years of gratitude and pride. In the sky above the plaza, something appeared. It was the Defiance. Not the original ship, which had been too damaged to repair, but a replica. An exact copy, built from the salvaged components and new materials, restored to look exactly as the ship had before the battle. The replica had been completed just in time for the anniversary. It would never fly again, just as the original never would. But it would be preserved in orbit around Elysium Prime, a permanent memorial to what had happened there. As the crowd watched, the replica Defiance was towed into position by a group of smaller ships. It turned slowly, catching the light of the sun, its hull gleaming like a symbol of hope against the stars. The ceremony continued for several more hours. There were speeches from politicians and military leaders. There were performances by musicians and artists. There were moments of silence and moments of celebration. And through it all, the survivors of the Defiance sat on the stage and watched. They were getting older now, their bodies showing the marks of time and battle. But their eyes were bright with memory and meaning. Later that evening, after the crowd had gone home and the plaza had emptied, Rodriguez found himself standing alone at the base of a statue. The statue had been erected 5 years ago, on the 5th anniversary of the battle. It showed Captain Amara Chun standing at the helm of her ship, her face calm and determined, her hand raised in a gesture of defiance. "Hello, Captain," Rodriguez said quietly. "It's been a long time." The statue did not answer, of course. But Rodriguez felt as if Chun could hear him somehow, somewhere. "You would be proud of what we've accomplished," he continued. "The colony is thriving. The human race is growing. We've made alliances with species that used to be our enemies. The galaxy is more peaceful than it's been in centuries." He touched the base of the statue. "But it wouldn't have happened without you. You showed us what was possible. You showed us that one person, one ship, can make a difference. You gave us hope when we had none." He was silent for a moment, remembering. "I think about you every day. I think about the moment you told Lord Vithros to come get us. I think about the way you smiled when you gave the order to attack. I think about your voice at the end, telling us to remember that we were part of something that mattered." He smiled sadly. "We remember, Captain. We always will." A voice came from behind him. "Talking to the statue again?" Rodriguez turned to see Elena approaching. She was wearing a simple dress, her military uniform put away for the evening. She looked beautiful in the fading light. "Old habit," Rodriguez said. "I like to update her on how things are going." Elena came to stand beside him. She slipped her hand into his. "She would be happy," Elena said. "Everything she fought for has come true. Humanity is safe. The Empire has fallen. The galaxy is changing." "Yes," Rodriguez agreed. "But there's still work to do. There will always be work to do." "True, but we can handle it. We're human. That's what we do." Rodriguez laughed softly. That's exactly what she would have said. They stood together in the fading light, looking up at the statue of Captain Amar Chun. Above them, the stars were beginning to appear. Thousands of points of light scattered across the infinite darkness. Among those stars, on 100 different worlds, other beings were looking up at the same sky. They were telling stories to their children of a ship called the Defiance and the humans who had refused to give up. They were passing down a legend that would last for generations. And somewhere in the vastness of space, in a place beyond time and memory, Amar Chun was watching. She was seeing the future she had helped to create. She was knowing that her sacrifice had meant something. The story of the Defiance would never end. It would be told and retold, changed and embellished, passed from world to world and species to species. The details would shift over time, but the core truth would remain. When darkness comes, when hope dies, when the numbers say you cannot win, fight anyway. That is what it means to be human. And in the end, that is what makes humans extraordinary. Not their technology or their strength or their numbers. Their spirit. Their refusal to accept defeat. Their belief that no matter how bad things get, there is always a chance for victory. The Defiance had proven that. And now the entire galaxy knew it. Rodriguez and Elena walked away from the statue, hand in hand, heading home. The night was quiet and peaceful. The stars shone brightly overhead. It was a good night to be human. It was a good night to remember. And somewhere in the darkness, the spirit of the Defiance lived on, eternal and undying, a beacon of hope for all who refused to surrender. The Armada was defeated. The Empire had fallen. Victory belonged to humanity. And it always would.